3, 4 years ago. And I thought that that was the root cause of trauma. And in many cases, it is the root cause of trauma for a large population in the world. But there's something new that I recently learned about called generational trauma. They were doing studies on Holocaust survivors from World War II, and they were doing studies on their children with post-traumatic stress. And they started finding out that the DNA from the Holocaust survivors was being inherited by the actual children. And if you think of it from a biological standpoint of when a person gives birth to a child, their hormones, their DNA, all these chemical processes are literally creating a human being. Trauma has so many different chemical processes in it, and it unfortunately does get transferred to the child. There is so much data on this that this is actually industry standard, when only a few years ago it was actually very controversial. Mm-hmm. But there's so much data on it now that generational trauma is widely accepted by the mental health communities with all mental health professionals. And it blew me away because I always thought that I had a sensitivity when I was a child to trauma, because I was bullied, and I was brutally bullied, sure, but for some reason, my brothers and stuff, like, they went through a very hard life too, but they didn't get the same psychological problems that I had.
Okay.
And what I did is I connected the dots, and I said, you know what, my father and my mother, and my entire Irish family came from a lot of trauma. My grandfather was a gangster in the Montreal Mafia, and put my dad through a lot of problems and a lot of trauma. And the very fact that, at the age of 8, 9 years old, I was having insomnia. I was having literally Afghanistan veteran like symptoms of not being able to sleep. Everything's a threat. And I didn't know what it was. I just thought that I was broken.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And this generational trauma that I'm very sure that I had actually created a hypersensitivity to future traumas. And I connected these dots quite recently after really learning about the generational trauma. But it makes me think of how many other people are being born in this world with, generational trauma. They have a vulnerability and hypersensitivity to, having future traumas. Instead of it moving through them, it's actually staying with them and creating a dark personality of emotional pain.